Good afternoon, guys. Here is the video for the second assignment for this week, April 20th through 24th. This entire video is going to be over slope-intercept form. We covered slope-intercept form right before Christmas, and it is something that you're going to have to use a lot in algebra next year, so I wanted to make sure we went over it. If you guys remember that there is a formula that we consider to be slope-intercept form, and all linear equations can be put into this formula. It's y equals mx plus b, or some of you guys affectionately call it y mixpa, okay? And if you remember, there are different parts that we label in this equation, in this formula. First of all, the x and the y, okay, they're gonna stay in the formula, and they're gonna represent coordinates on a graph, okay? M is our slope, okay? And remember that slope is, like we talked about before, rise over run, how far you go up or down, over how far you go left or right, or the change in y over change in x, okay? Slope is going to be written as a fraction. It can be an improper fraction. It can also be a whole number if the denominator would be 1. Sometimes we just write it as the whole number, okay? So that's your slope is always gonna be attached to your x, okay? And then here, this plus b is your y-intercept, okay? And the y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis, which is our vertical axis, okay? Now, if it's plus b, that means that the y-intercept is positive. It's gonna cross above the origin. If you have a minus b, that means the y-intercept is negative and crosses below the origin. Okay, so that plus or minus will change depending on where the line crosses on the y-axis. Okay, so the first part of your assignment asks you to find the slope and the y-intercept from an equation. Okay, and with that, you don't have to graph it. We're just gonna pull out things. The first example I have for you is y equals 1/3 x minus 2. Okay, remember that our slope is always gonna be attached to the x. So in this one, our slope is 1/3, or 1/3. Okay, so if we graphed that, we would be going up 1 and to the right 3 from point to point. Okay, and so we're just gonna write that as a fraction. And our y-intercept is gonna be over here. It's a minus 2. Now remember that the y-intercept is considered to be a coordinate, so we're gonna write that as 0, -2. The y-intercept will always have a 0 first. Okay. And this is going to be the most common way that you see these types of problems. You also could see something like y equals 4x. Okay, we know from looking at this that 4 is going to be our slope. Okay, because it's attached to the x. We can write that as 4, or you could do 4/1, which means if you would go up 4 and to the right 1, but remember the 1 on the bottom is understood. Okay. Now, if you notice, there's not a plus or a minus anything here. Okay, so with that, we can think of that as being plus or minus 0. Okay, so when you see y equals 4x or y equals 2x or even y equals 1/2 x, and you don't have anything that you're adding or subtracting, that doesn't mean that you don't have a y-intercept. That means that the y-intercept is 0, 0, or it goes through the origin. Okay, so this line would pass right through the origin. Okay, now this example is a little bit more complicated because we have 2x plus 4y equals 16. Now, for slope-intercept form to work, y has to be by itself. So down here, we're gonna have to rearrange some things before we can find the slope and the y-intercept, okay? We need to get y by itself. So the first thing we're gonna do is move this, okay? So we're gonna subtract 2x from both sides, okay? This is gonna cross out, and we get 4y equals, now I can rearrange this to be -2x plus 16. Oh, Sorry guys, Alex is here. Okay. Now, right here, I still have something attached to y. So this is multiplication. To undo multiplication, I divide. Okay. This is going to cancel. And I get y equals, now right here, negative 2x over 4, I can rewrite that like this, okay, plus 16 over 4. This is going to simplify to be negative 1/2 x plus 4. Okay, so in this equation, I can now see that negative 1/2 would be my slope. And my y-intercept would be 0,4. Okay. The last type of problem that you can see is if you have y equals 3. Once again, this looks like something is missing. We don't have an x, okay? We know that this is understood to be y equals 0x plus 3, okay? Because 0x would just cancel out. So in this one, our slope would be 0. Our y-intercept would be 0,3. And if you guys remember, a line with a slope of 0, okay, anytime you see a slope of 0, that's a horizontal line. Okay, so that means that when you see a horizontal line, your equation is going to just be y equals, and then your number right here is wherever it crosses the y-axis. Okay. Okay, the problem I picked off of your homework assignment is number 5. Okay, once again, we have to move things around before we can solve these. So I need to get y by itself. Okay, whatever is attached to y is going to be the last thing to move. So the first thing I would move would be my 5x. To get rid of it, I would subtract 5x from both sides. Okay, I would get 2y equals, now right here, I can rearrange this to say negative 5x plus 6. Okay, because this sign right here goes with the 5x. To undo this multiplication, this 2y, I would divide by 2. Okay, which means I'm going to divide both of these by 2. So I'm going to move up here. My answer would be y equals negative 5 over 2x. Sorry, that's a 5. And then 6 over 2 is going to simplify to positive 3. So on this problem, my slope would be negative 5 over 2, and I'm going to leave that as an improper fraction. And my y-intercept would be 0,3. Okay, the last part of this assignment is when you're given a graph. Rather than give the equation, you're given the graph, and you have to find the slope, the y-intercept, and then write the equation, okay? So if you look at this example, once again, sorry about having the hand-drawn graphs, okay? Right here, okay, the first thing I see is that my y-intercept is crossing the y-axis right here. And I know that this point right here is 0, because I don't move it all left or right, and I'm going up 2, so that'd be a positive 2, okay? And if I notice there are different points along my line, and I can pick any 2 points to find the slope. So if I picked the y-intercept, okay, to get to the next point, I can go up 1, which is a positive 1, and then I go to the right 1, which is also positive. If I had gone down and to the left, that would have been a negative 1 over negative 1, and a negative over negative is going to turn to a positive. So the slope here, no matter which way I go, is going to be 1. Okay. So down here, I can just write the slope as 1 or 1 over 1, but you're not going to really see that in algebra. The y-intercept is 0, 2. Okay. And now when I write the equation, I'm going to plug it back into my slope-intercept form. So it's always going to start with y equals, okay, for m, which is my slope, I'm going to put in a 1x. X is going to stay. And then this is a positive y-intercept, so it would be plus 2. Now right here, we know that this 1 can be invisible. It's understood. If we see x by itself, we know there's a 1 in front of it. So the answer, when we rewrite it, would be y equals x plus 2. And that's the equation that works for any point on this line, screen line. Okay, problem number 9 is the one I chose from your homework. Okay, once again, my y-intercept is going to be right here, which is 0. Always start with a 0. And I'm going down 1, 2, 3, so negative 3. Okay, so that's my y-intercept. Okay, my slope right here, if I start at this point, to get to the next point, I would go up 1, 2, and over 1, 2. If you notice, I could do it again, up 1, 2, and to the left, 1, 2. Okay, now because I'm going up, that would be a positive 2. And when I go to the left, that's a negative 2. Okay, now on this, the 2 and the 2 can cancel, but because of this negative sign, my slope's actually going to be negative 1. So my slope is negative 1. Okay, now guys, remember, your slope is not always going to be 1 or negative 1. That just happened to be the 2 examples that I chose. Okay, so your slope could be anything. Okay, so when I go to plug it into my slope-intercept form, okay, I'm always going to start with y equals my slope, the m, is negative 1, and it's attached to x. This time my y-intercept is negative, so it's going to be minus 3. And when I go to clean this up, I would go y equals, the 1 can disappear, but I have to keep the negative sign, so it would be negative x minus 3. And that's the equation that works for, once again, the entire line. Okay, guys, let me know if you have any questions.